Live services, a genre that has become ever growing in the world of video games, sparking caution, concern with regards to monetization, its content quality, and how it keeps the player engaged. There are good examples of how a live service can be adopted. Just look at how Helldivers 2's model from earlier this year was implemented. One big player in the free-to-play live service space is miHoYo, the studio behind the Weeb Odyssey Genshin Impact, providing a free-to-play world with collectible characters acquired through gacha mechanics. For those unfamiliar with that term, it is essentially acquiring characters and items similar to how loot boxes work, but in a different way where you pull a certain character and collect them, along with new activities and content that they would release throughout the year. Well, now miHoYo are back with their new Hackerman Y2K pseudo-cyberpunk themed adventure, Zenless Zone Zero. Now, we're about a month since this game has released, and I've completed the game's main story and invested a decent amount of time into the side activities and spent $0 in the process of doing that. This is my first time playing one of miHoYo's games. I played a little bit of Genshin when it first released all those years back, but I never really clicked with it, and same with Honkai Star Rail. I've never really played that game, but with Zenless Zone Zero, I really went in with no expectations and ended up playing it quite regularly. So, well, with all that being said, how did I find this game? I want to outline at the start of this review that I think Zenless Zone Zero is a good game and a well put together one too. I really enjoyed my time with it, but do I think this game will be for everyone? No. So this review in many ways is why I think Zenless Zone Zero is a good experience and your typical review, but it also serves the purpose of aiming the question at, does this experience really fit the type of experience for you before committing to pressing that download button? So without further delay, let's get into my review for Zenless Zone Zero. So now we'll talk about the story for Zenless Zone Zero, and to save you the whole word salad that is all the jargon and language, the different lingo that occupies this game, I'm going to keep it fairly brief and to the point. Essentially, you play as two different characters, Wise and Bell, who are these hackers that are known as proxies, that essentially guide different people and take on these missions called commissions. The people that they help are usually these agents, people of different teams, and the stories are centered around many of these different agents and their adventures and inquiries. So throughout the main 3 chapters of this game, you'll be getting introduced to many of the different agents. However, these people that you'll be playing as during the combat segments are these agent characters, but the story, the main story at least, is focused around Fafen, these main characters. Eventually, as the game opens up, you'll get more stories into the agents as well, and it does feel a little slow at the start, I'll be honest, and it is a bit of a slog to really get into. But I think once you get past those early stretches, you can start to see a lot of the different threads start to come together as it introduces more of its characters, and I do believe that the story will become more and more promising over time. At this point in time, it wasn't the main draw or reason for me coming to play Zenless Zone Zero, but the narrative beats do grow on you and you do start to get a bit of appreciation for the characters once you get to know them. And I do think a lot of the characters in this game have a lot of heart and charm. Like, I know the difference between Billy's personality to someone else like Nicole or Ambi, and that's like just one team of characters and they all have very distinct personalities. Yes, don't get me wrong, they aren't something you haven't seen before, they very much do fit an archetype, but I do think in a lot of ways I'm okay with that, and it still is a level of personality, and I do think there is some interest, and I do think getting to know these characters through their side stories does add a layer of dimension to them. I think that this game really, once you hit that second chapter, really does start to show the formula that this game will be going for with its story. And don't get me wrong as well, with its story, there is a lot of exposition, a lot. Especially like in the early stages of the game, it really does feel like a disruption almost in terms of its pacing, where it can be a hindrance to the gameplay, where I'm just like, I just want to play and get the feel for this. And you know, so much jargon and different language to try and get your head around, and so much stuff that they just throw out and expect you to know and familiarize yourself with, that it would make a game like Final Fantasy 13 blush. But for me, the overall character of this experience was enough for me to really push past it. And the more you play this game and the more you get through it, you really do start to get a feel for everything. There's a lot of details and a lot of information that are laid out, but then once you get familiar with the terminology, the world, all the different locations, you really do start to get into a rhythm and a vibe. I don't think it has this crazy sense of world building or character development that would win any Game of the Year awards, but I think at the same time, it is serviceable enough for the type of gameplay experience experience that's facilitating, and I think that they are really setting up a nice roadmap, and eventually over time, as this story pans out, I can see a lot of threads coming together and this actually telling a pretty interesting story, because by the later chapters, I was a lot more interested to see where the villains and a lot of these characters come into play and how things start to unfold. But I think for some people, it'll be hit or miss whether or not you do gel with Zenless Zone Zero's story, but at the same time, I don't think a lot of people will walk out really disliking it either. It's one of those things that I think at worst, you'll just be indifferent towards, or you may end up liking and getting into due to how some of the characters really are quite charming. Zenless Zone Zero's combat is over the top, stylish, and bombastic, but in other ways one-dimensional, with characters having an attack, dodge, parry, and lastly, an ultimate. ZZZ does a great job with its damage numbers and absolutely does nail the feeling of doing a lot, but in terms of its movesets and kits, I do feel like it doesn't really reinvent the wheel and does make you look like you're doing more than you're actually doing. With that being said though, there are characters here that do come with their own gauges, particular quirks and movesets, abilities, things that make them unique and stand out and really do weave well into the matchups for combat. And I think that overall there is many different mechanisms at play here that makes what on the surface looks like a very simplistic button mashing affair feel like a bit more of a fun, and the biggest word I'll use for Zenless Zone Zero's combat, satisfying. There's many different enemies here that come with different elemental proficiencies that are strong against them, and there's different matchups that you can align and assign for these particular tasks to get the best outcomes. Overall, there is a good variety of enemies here as well to face, and the foundations of ZZZ's combat is actually quite fun, and if you're just looking to kick back and relax, then I feel like you will really just be right at home here with this experience. There is a level of flexibility that does open up, and the gameplay does get more and more flexible the more you do unlock various progression systems and progression trees in this game, which we will discuss later in the video. I would like to see them expand more over time, maybe introducing something like weapons that can be tailored to each character's class, and then those particular weapons come with a unique ability, something that can really just spruce up and add an extra dimension to the combat. Because I do think there's a lot going on here and a lot that you can do, but overall, I think that ultimately there's a lot more that it looks like is going on than actually is going on. And I think that ZZZ's combat feels satisfying more from the enemies you face and the multitude of different activities that you partake in rather than the combat itself. The combat itself is satisfying because it is so fun to watch and the pure spectacle of it, but if you are someone that's wanting to jump in this purely from the mechanical angle and you're wanting to learn characters that have a lot of depth, quirks, and interesting little mechanics, there is an element of that, but not to the level that or extent that you may be hoping for. If you're looking for activities that mirror something with like raid-like mechanics, or you're looking for enemies and boss encounters that are super complex, or you're looking for even missions that'll really test how you understand the kit of the player, I think ZZZ really is a game that hasn't quite got there yet. It has some of that, but I don't think if you are wanting that sweaty experience, this is quite like that game for you. But if you are looking for a game that is fun, then I think that this game is more marketed towards you. If you're looking for a game that you can just jump in and do some fun activities, whether it's on your phone or on your PC, then I think that this game's combat loop is something for you. Because for me, what I got out of ZZZ was the fun of just partaking in different activities and having this really fun, stylish combat. And I keep looping back to that word fun because there's two words really to describe ZZZ's combat, and that is fun, satisfying, and it really does just keep you interested, and the various different characters are fun to play around with. I think that its combat, say what you will about its level of simplicity and its combat on the surface, there is this core feature that despite not being overly complex, still manages to be that three-letter word, fun. For me, Zenless Zone Zero's fun comes from the combat, the activities, and the loop of progression found in the game's various systems. Independently, these things may seem one-dimensional, as I mentioned earlier, but when they all click together, they make a surprisingly fun loop that you just can't help but get engaged with. Some people may bounce off this, and I can totally see that, and I think that is fair. But for others, I think you might find something really fun here because there always is something to do, and given this cross-platform nature of the game, you can just log in whenever you want, and you can just kick back and the combat is satisfying, engaging, and it looks nice and it's cool, and it really does feel fun, and it's not overly complicated. I would say that it's something that you can really just get into and pick up pretty easily, but there is this level of progression and everything feels kind of worthwhile doing, and then you end up having this fun experience. And I think for those who really do click with ZZZ, I think a lot of it is going to come more from that fun in the progression loop rather than the combat alone. But that isn't to say the combat is bad, it's just a driver and a part of the core gameplay loop that keeps the game satisfying. And the big thing, the second component that I think keeps this gameplay loop so fun is primarily its game modes. Yes, Zenless Zone Zero offers a good variety of content, and as you get more into the game, more of its various activities and mission types open up to you. One thing that I think will put off some is how long it takes for this game to really get into that flow, that rhythm, and have everything opened up to the player. But I feel that the game does do a good job overall at introducing the player to the world and the multitude of activities that you can participate in. First and foremost, you'll be playing through the main missions, which will carry out the story and push it forward, and then you'll have a subsequent activity that is tasked to the player. These are those main commissions I was talking about earlier, and they tie into many of the different agent and the Faithin story that I mentioned earlier in the review. Then there is two of the other forms of missions that you'll be able to take on at your computer. Those are the exploration missions, which work as dungeon crawler-esque missions where you are going between these different platforms, and then you will sometimes go to a combat encounter, or you'll alternatively go through to different areas, and it's like this little Hacker-Man experience. It's a cool foundation, and I'm really interested to see where they evolve on this, because I do think that it gets a little repetitive after a while, but there is a cool idea there, and I'm interested to see how they evolve that over time. The one aspect that I feel like is really a strength of Zenless Zone Zero is when it primarily is putting you in the shoes of combat, and what better place to do that than the combat encounters. So combat encounters are what you would expect. They're like little combat simulations, and they work like a charm, and those things are fun to do. But I think the meat and what people will find the most satisfying in this combat loop and these activities is the stuff that comes later on. Activities like Hollow Zero, which is a fun, interesting mode that combines the combat and exploration activities I mentioned earlier into one, where you have this dungeon crawler-esque activity that in a lot of ways kind of pulls elements of a roguelike, where you are getting certain pickups and activities and builds as you're running through these levels, and they get progressively harder as you go through these levels, and your characters need to be parallel to an actual level, and then as you're going through them, you're facing harder foes, and it usually eventuates into fighting a boss. And there's some good rewards there, and that is more like an endgame activity that you'll be having in the ZZZ experience. There is also another side activity that opens up called Shiyu Defense, which works like a horde mode, and then you've also got missions like rally missions, which are like this long level that plays like a Hollow Zero level, where you're just running point to point, and then it's awesome. It's the one experience where you feel like you get to control your characters and you're in and out of combat. It's very snappy. And then lastly, you have VR missions, which are just like little brief missions that you can do, where you get some of the materials to level up your characters and their various equipment. There's a lot here to really dive into, and I think that there's a lot of different elements, and I think that the two things that you'll probably be drawn to early on in this experience is the Shiyu Defense and the Hollow Zero. There's a bunch of other stuff too, and Hoyo have really done a good job at just rolling out more and more content for this, so I imagine only with time you'll have more stuff to do. But there's enough in this game to do, and every day when you log in, you can get particular rewards which will give you that currency called Polychrome, which you are able to use to participate in unlocking characters and getting various different items and equipment. Of course, it's through that gacha mechanism, but it's an in-game way of rewarding you with that currency to get that form of progression. I really do appreciate the amount of content here and the way that they are continuing to add more content, and it's been really fun. I've put about 40 to 50 hours into this game so far, and I haven't really gotten over it or done everything, and there's a lot there, and it does refresh, and there's a lot of different stuff to do. If you do find the combat fun, and you do just want to kick back and relax, and I think there's a lot to be had here, and there's a lot of different game modes that really do ask a lot of different things from the player, which does make that gameplay loop that I talked about initially that is called into question feel more satisfying because of how different activities are broken up. Sure, if you just look at the combat at face value, you might see something here that looks simple, but there is an added level of complexity that comes in later on, and even if that isn't enough for you, the level of variety with activities here may gel with you. Zenless Zone Zero's core gameplay and activities, as fun as they are built around servicing the sense of progression that you can get, whether it be in the form of your agent, your W engine, or the different data disks that you get. I said a lot of things there, but I'll explain what each of those are sequentially. So Zenless Zone Zero does a good job at introducing many of these various systems to the player throughout the game. The W engine is introduced pretty early on, and the way that this works is that it provides a buff and benefit to the player based on the different classes of their agents. Yes, I didn't mention this in the combat section, but each class is assigned to a particular agent, whether it's support, attack, ranged, or something of that nature. There is different classes for all of these different agents that you play as, along with different abilities and affinities like ether, ice, electric, things like this. And like I said, different matchups against different enemies will give certain benefits. So the way that you'll be looking at this is you'll be looking at the W engine as this core driver that is assigned to your class, which will benefit it overall. And then you'll have these drive disks, which will be more assigned to different affinities and different damage boosts, things like crit damage, ether damage, things like this. They're nothing too substantial to the overall flow of combat, but they are that sense of progression that allows you to have certain proficiencies against certain enemies and boost the damage that you deal to particular enemies. It's fun, and with the amount of different loops there, I do think it is pretty interesting and keeps the game feeling fun. It isn't the most sophisticated thing that you will see, and in a lot of ways it is very simple, but I think that more to my point with this review, I feel like Zenless Zone Zero's systems aren't designed to be overly complicated, and I think that this low barrier to entry is kind of what makes it so fun. You can just jump in and experience it, and it's just easy to get into a rhythm and play the game. But with that being said, yes, there are different tiers and rarities for all of these different W engines and drive disks as well, and the types of progression and things that they attribute is more just like damage percentages and things of that nature. But one thing that I think this game does do very well is the way that it provides you a sense of progression. I feel like every time I log in, there is something to do. And after 40 to 50 hours, still logging in and feeling like there's a sense of progression is great. I feel like there is something to do, but there's no real, outside of the Gacha Elements, which we'll get to, there's no real sense of FOMO like you're missing out. There is always something to be striving for and chasing, which is in the game, and I think that is pretty good. I also like that Zenless Zone Zero also has a sense of activities and ways to reward you. Every week where I've logged in to play this game, I feel like there's something new going on and a unique activity that just makes the experience of that particular week feel that much more fun. And I'm like, man, they had one week a rhythm game where you had to tap at a certain time and get different scores, and then the other week they had someone selling random goods, and there's these different activities that are taking place at all different times, and they're slowly trickling out new activities, as I mentioned before. So there's always a sense of progression. Lastly, I want to talk about the agents, because they all come with this set of abilities that I mentioned in the combat section. That was your attack, dash, and your ultimate, and things of that nature. You're able to level up these individual abilities, having them do more damage as well, and you also have different skills that are assigned to each agent as well that you can unlock over time. So what I said in the combat section about this being simplistic still rings true, but there are more things that you can unlock over time that do add to a level of variety in how you can level up your characters and who you choose to play as, and different mods and things that can at least give you a unique spin on your playstyle. It's not to some crazy level of depth that you'll find in an RPG or anything of that nature, but there are more like modifiers that make you customize and improve your agents, making them feel more proficient when you take on more harder activities in the later segments of the game. Now onto the most contentious part of this review, and the one thing that I feel will put some off Zenless Zone Zero, and that is the gacha elements that are inescapable in this whole progression loop that is found in the game. It really is a core driver for both unlocking new agents and the W engines to match. I get it. It's a free-to-play game, and with how much they are giving away to the player free of charge, they need to make their money somehow. And that is how? Through these gacha incentives that come into play. However, throughout my time playing the game, I was able to unlock most of the characters and a good chunk of the W engines just through playing the game and in-game rewards. I have yet to pay a single dollar for anything, and that is after 40 to 50 hours of playtime. The game does feel fair in its rewards economy. Everything technically is earnable. The biggest thing you'll see is the pulls. You'll have to pull these characters and different W engines with an in-game currency that you acquire by putting down either cash or getting in-game rewards. However, these banners ensure that there is a fail-safe reward system, meaning after 100 attempts, you will be given an S tier hero, which is that hero that is only around for a certain period of time. You'll also get an A tier hero every 10 levels as well. So every 10 times you pull, you will get at least an A guaranteed, meaning you are at least getting some meaningful reward and not the shit tier ones all the time. I do believe though that being able to acquire all these things in game and these rewards does require you to actually play the game on a regular basis, and there is plenty of stuff there to get those rewards, but you will have to play. There is no level gating or anything that really does slow down progression over periods of time. There's activities that you can do every day to give you a set amount, and if you do play enough, you should be able to get these. But with that being said, there is still an inescapable level of FOMO that does come with this, as these heroes will be appearing for a 2-week interval, and then they disappear until that banner returns, and then you're able to get them again. When will that be? Well, I'm not too sure. I had to take to the forums to have a look, as I'd missed the first character from the first banner when the game released, Ellen. So that's one character that I am currently not able to obtain, at least until they put her back in the game and reappear with her banner. When that will be, it seems like the forums generally said about 6 months to a year, so I guess I just gotta wait. But yeah, I do think that these aspects do make you want to play the game as much as possible if you really want to get a character, or alternatively are incentivized to make you pull out that wallet. Overall, given the nature of the game and how much content there is to just play here that is accessible, I think it does come with the territory. So I think with Zenless Zone Zero, if you aren't a fan of those types of gacha elements, this game is definitely not going to win you over. But however, in Zenless Zone Zero's defense, I will say that I do feel that these gacha elements are not predatory, and I do think that there is a lot of opportunity for you to obtain many of the different variables, and whether it be the characters, the engines, and many of the standard S tier characters, just through playing the game. And the fact that they have a failsafe for you to acquire this, I think is good as well. It means if you play the game long enough, you will get the character. So on that side, I do think that this game is pretty fair and doesn't have this predatory system where you are just getting like the bottom of the barrel for 100 pulls and then you get nothing. I think they do have a good incentive here to reward you regularly, and they do give you the statistics and the percentages of winning as well. They're very transparent with all that stuff. So yeah, I think overall it does do a good job at playing it fair, but those systems are in place and there is monetization tied to it. So if that is something that ultimately just turns you off from giving this experience a chance, I can't blame you. But I will say, on the side of that type of monetization and that loot box kind of system, yeah, it's there, and I do think it's more on the fair side. Zone Zero absolutely nails is how it handles both its visual and sound presentation. And I'm waiting to break down now why I feel that way. Starting with the visual presentation. Man, ZZZ has an incredible aesthetic and atmosphere, and the anime stylized world of New Eridu pops to life, and in every area of the world you can explore as Belle or Wise feels like it is so vibrant and packed full of little details, and it's such a nice looking world to be in. Even if there are a limited amount of places here that you can actually interact with, the world itself is ever evolving and it does look incredible. The UI is quite nice as well, and there's a nice sense of style to it, and also it doesn't feel so over cumbersome with menu upon menu just to customize things. It's quite compact and easy to navigate and use, and I think that that works really well, especially on the mobile side of things with that part of the experience, but also from the PC side it works very well, and I think it's just simple, easy to get the hang of, and everything is in its right place and easy to just identify where things are. There is a ton of different things and a ton of different notifications though that do pop up, and it can become quite tiresome, and there is a lot of different icons to get familiar with at first, but I think that the way that it's all mapped together and where these different things align themselves, once you get a feel for it, it is easy to identify where a lot of things are, and I think that they've done a good job with making it easy to navigate a lot of these different menus. But I've saved the best part for last. The cutscenes, the comic book looking screens, and the in-game discussions. All of these methods of exposition, they look unreal. From the freeze frame comic moments to the more traditional cutscenes, and not only do they do an unreal job here, but they're all voiced too. And that brings me to the sound for this game. Man, there is so much voice work that has been placed into this game and packed into this experience to accompany many of these story components and make them that much more engaging. And that is one aspect of the story and the main story here that I think is really good, as along with the side content too. There's a lot of voice work, a lot of different animation and effects that are put into this to make you really care about the personalities of these characters and the story that's at play. I think the story still has ways to go in terms of its substance, but its delivery and the way that it's sold is really great, and I think it is in large part due to the animation style, the different techniques they use here, and the sound work as well. And man, ZZZ actually has a really good soundtrack. It is a jam, and there's a good variety here, from this jazz inspired mix to the more EDM like boppin' like type of tracks that play when you're in combat. Hoyo have done a fantastic job here, and the presentation of this game all around is something that can really just get you hooked, from its combat to just exploring the world. There is so much effects, flair, and style here, and I think if they keep adding substance to the story with its character side quests and agent side stories, along with the main story that they're clearly threading and weaving a more larger scale like plot line, I think there'll be a lot here to really take away from ZZZ's story. Not only that, if they continue to evolve the gameplay as well with this fun and engaging foundation that they've built, I think that in all respects, ZZZ will be this really stylish game with a ton of flair, fun, and substance. Wrapping this video up and tying it all together, Zenless Zone Zero is a game that I would say I really enjoyed my time with. There was something that was just so enjoyable about jumping in and clearing out a few different objectives, seeing some quality cinematics, and a variation of roster of really interesting existing characters, and seeing it expand as I played through the game, just seeing new characters come out, new stories and side stories being told. Overall, this game was really satisfying, and there was just a ton of new things to uncover, whether it was new gameplay activities, new stories, new content releasing. There is something always going on in this game, and it was just crazy to me. And I think once you get past the early hours and find a rhythm, it really is an incredible game with an abundance of things to do. And if you just check in once a week even, or a few times a week just playing this game, you will always find you're in for a good time, and whether you're playing it just for an hour to clear off some dailies, there is always some good fun to be had playing this game. I think its combat is really enjoyable and really fun to play. It's engaging for just how over the top and bombastic it is, how stylish it is, and it is fun to engage with. There is a good variation of characters here and a lot of different synergies to make, a lot of different classes to try and collect and compound together and see what you can do. Its base formula for combat may be simplistic in some respects, but overall when you put all the different elements of progression, combat, and different characters and their kits together, it does make for an interesting variation of combat. And I think overall, if you can get past some of the early cutscenes with a lot of exposition, I'd wager you're in for a good time, and there will be aspects and elements of Zenless Zone Zero's experience that you will enjoy. And if anything, this experience that I've had with my 40 to 50 hours playing this game has only made me more excited to see the new game modes, the new content that they release in future, whether it be characters, stories, or exclusive game modes. Just coming to this game, I'm really keen, and I feel like for a game that's accessible running seamlessly on both mobile and PC, and having your save just go instantaneously across between both of these platforms, it's a no-brainer just giving this game a try, because I think like this game has a lot of fun, and whether you're sitting on the train just clearing off some missions, or you get home and you just want to kick back and play for an hour, it's just a fun way to kick back and enjoy this game. And I know Genshin and Honkai have that same accessibility function, but I feel that the way and approach that Zenless Zone Zero goes for here really does allow you to play it for a brief period of time or a long period of time. And look, I can't really speak much to Genshin, but I feel like ZZZ's formula and the way that it's structured with its reasonably sized activities can both cater to that more longer session of play and those more short form sessions of play. And I think that it's a great game for it. And I think that only time will show how good this game is. And I think that for a free to play game offering this much content and a fair model for its gacha system, I think that Zenless Zone Zero really is a game that I think was worth the time playing, and I reckon you should at least check out to see if you like. But anyway, that's been my video, and I hope that you've enjoyed it, and I've got a few other videos in the pipeline on the way, with a Persona 3 reload video in the works, and I'm looking to try and cover a few other games as well. I'm writing a script for a few different videos right now, and I've also just put a link in this video and on the community tab for a new Discord. So if you're looking to chat and just have some discussions about games with me or anyone in that community, I'm looking to just, feel free to join and have a chat. Anyways, thanks for watching the video, and I hope you have a good one. See you in the next one.